Thank you so much for being here today. Halina is, I've known Halina a very long time, but I always find out new things every time I go over your history, which is actually very nice for me. But I wanted to have you start out by talking about what your childhood was like in the mid to late 30s, before 1938.
Well, I can't remember that one.
What you can remember.
Before 1938, I was very, very young. As I said, as you told us, I was about 6.5 when the war broke out. We were living in a small town called Zaleszczyki, and my father was a dentist, so he had a surgery in the front of the house. We were living in the back. It was a beautiful town with a river almost completely surrounding it. My mother had been a champion swimmer, so she loved the water, and she would do water skiing, and I had a paddle, and we used to paddle around on the water there. There were two beaches, we would go from one to the other, sunny beach and a shady beach. And as I said, life was good. The weather was fantastic. My mother was an all-round sportswoman, so she taught me to skate when I was 5. My father, who decided that before kindergarten I had to learn to read the paper because I was the first, so I had to be the good pupil. So I never remember anything that, not knowing how to read Polish or write Polish, because he taught me so early that, as I said, I don't remember any of it. In addition to that, my mother taught me to embroider and to knit and a little crochet. So as a young child, I was very lucky. I had toys, I had bicycles and tricycles. So my mother took wonderful care of us. She knitted everything I had on. So we had a wonderful life, and I was just about to go to kindergarten when the war broke out.
So let me back up a little bit and ask, were your parents practicing Jews?
No, they were liberal. My father came from a religious family. My mother came from a liberal family. That's why she and all her siblings went to Polish schools, and she
as opposed to Jewish schools?
Not the Jewish, no, not Jewish. Polish schools, just general schools.
Mm-hmm. Yes. And did they speak Yiddish in the home?
No, because my mother didn't speak Yiddish. My father did, but my mother did not.
And you said that your father was a dentist.
Correct.
And what was he like? What kind of a person was he like?
He was fun. He was a great joker, and he was very, very fond of me, and he didn't like it when my mother tried to discipline me.
So your sister was younger than you by 6 years, yes?
6.5, yeah.
So what was it like when she was born for you?
Well,
what was that like, being the center of everyone's attention, then suddenly?
No, it wasn't like that at all. No, we waited for her. I was very anxious, to have a brother or sister. And remember my mother, I asked her why she had this big tummy, and she said, you're going to have a brother or a sister. So she prepared me for that. My mother always told me the truth, and there was never any feeling that she would be taking my interest. No.
Right.
I really was like a second mother to her, especially through the rest of the war.
But she was born right before the war broke out.
Right. She was two months when the war broke out, yes.
So can you describe what that was like, what you remember of that?
Well, I remember that my mother had great troubles because there was some problem with feeding, and she suffered a lot with that. My sister was very small and a little sickly, and the war was coming on. Then, when 39 came around, and when we knew that the Russians were coming, we knew that the men seemed to be in greater danger than the women. At least that was their understanding. So my father, with some other people, some with family, some without, went over to Romania because the river was a natural frontier with Romania. Mm-hmm. And the men were afraid of being conscripted into the Russian army, which was what they thought because of the First World War. That's what they did. Never occurred to them that women and children would have any problem. Mm-hmm. So he just left.
So it was really more about protecting your father than anything. at that point.
Right, and then leaving my mother with the two of us. Yes.
And do you remember it being particularly difficult on your mother, having a newborn, having you?
I did, and that's why I'm saying, it was more taking care of the baby and my mother, because I became her support.
So what happened to your father? He tried to...
Well, after a few weeks, I don't know exactly how many, but everything was frozen over. The river was frozen over, so my father and some other people decided that the Russians had done all the bad things they were supposed to do, arrested people, took everything they could find of value, and they felt they could just slip back quietly and just rejoin the families. And unfortunately, the Russians had sealed the border at the time, and they caught them all. And my father was put on trial, and they said he was a spy. My father, the dentist, so they gave him 20 years hard labor and sent him off to Siberia. And so we lost him, so just the three of us.
Did he communicate at all, write? Was he able to write?
For the first year, no. After the first year, we got some communication, and we knew he was in Arkhangelsk up in Siberia.
Yes. So at first, your town becomes occupied, but not by the Germans.
No, but the Russians. There was an agreement between Russia and Germany in 1939. They split Poland in two.
Right.
Half the north part went to the Germans, and the east part was Russian. Yes, and also because my father was given the sentence, and he was a criminal, quote unquote, we were supposed to be going to Russia as well. They were going to take us to Siberia. But for some reason, I don't know why, they did not take us, but they threw us out of our house because it was too good to have a house with a family of a criminal. So we were told to go to a little place called Tworsta, just up the road. And so we packed up, and that's where we moved, and that's that picture of my mother, that's the only picture of my sister as a young child that we have.
In Tworsta.
Yes, and that was already there.
How long did you stay in Tworsta?
Till the end of the Russian occupation.
Which was 1941.
Yes, and they tried, the Russians dropped everybody one class because they wanted to have more time to educate us or re-educate us. So I went not to kindergarten, but pre-kindergarten. And luckily I knew how to read, so my mother kept me going that way. And I remember learning a little bit of Russian letters, not that I remember much of that, but yeah, they did try.
And do you remember anything about Tworsta other than maybe school?
Not much.
And how long were you there?
Until suddenly the Russians disappeared, and we understood that the Germans were coming.
So then you went back to...
Then we went back to Zelestiki and to our house and settled back in and waited for the new occupiers.
And the new occupiers were not German?
Yes, they were. The new ones were German.
At one point, though, the town is occupied by Yugoslavs. Is that not correct?
I don't remember the Yugoslavs. I remember the Germans coming down the road on bicycles and in black uniforms and gold buttons. I don't remember.
How did you feel when you saw them?
Scared. I was very scared because they came in a very loud way, motorcycles.
Right.
And with a big fat man in the front on the motorcycle, and the rest of them were all in black uniforms, shiny. It was very scary. Very scary.
And how was your mother through all of this? Did she continue to have a good facade, and could you feel her
My
fear?
mother did her best to take care of us, and I know she was having a very hard time with my sister, but we stuck together, and the man who was a technician for my father finished a few jobs, and that's how we were able to survive. Yeah.
So at one point your mother decides you can't remain anymore in Zeleshiki. And
No. Sorry. No, what happened was when the Germans came in, they gave us all new rules and regulations.
that's right.
The Jewish kids had no schools. We had to put yellow stars on the houses and on on our arms.
Right, because they're occupying you.
Pardon?
They're occupying the town. And you also mention in one of your oral histories that actions begin.
Yes, that's exactly what I was going to say. Every Jew had to be working for them, no matter whether there was a job or not. If there wasn't, they used to make them clean the sidewalks. And my mother, because they had a list of everybody and what everybody could do, and they knew my mother was a great knitter, so they made her be the chief knitter for the German mayor of the town, and she knitted for his children. That was her job, and of course the two of us. And then they started, everybody had to work for them, and they had various jobs to do. They created a committee of Jewish leaders there to be able to demand groups and whatever they needed. They didn't want to go around looking for people, so they had these few people that were in charge of giving them whatever they needed, and they would take groups of young people to work out in the farms and out in wherever they needed them to do some work.
But you don't actually use the word ghetto, but essentially it was a ghetto.
No, not in Zaleszczyki.
But it functioned the same way, but it was open.
No, I'm sorry.
What?
We should have discussed this before. We should have discussed this before. No, it was not a ghetto. We were all spread out in the town. A couple of times they took a group out and brought them back. And we accepted that was the system.
So people were leaving to go do slave labor or labor?
Well, they were slaves, more or less. They said they demanded 200 people, 100 people, or 50 people. They had to be in the morning, and they took them out on a job, and then they brought them back. And then the next thing, they wanted a very big group of about, there was about 600 plus people, because they wanted to bind trees for the winter, because winter was very, very severe in Zaleszczyki. And so people went, a lot of people even went voluntarily, because everybody wanted to help and, to be cooperative. And they walked them up the road as usual. And towards the afternoon, nobody was coming back, and everybody got very, very scared, not knowing what was happening. And nobody came back until late in the evening. One man came back, and he had been shot in the arm, and he told us what happened. When they got to the woods where those trees were to be bound, they found there was an open grave there with planks over it, and they were told to undress and lay down over the planks, and they were shot. And as they were shot, they dropped into the grave. And this man was one of the last ones to be shot. They missed his heart, and that's why he was on top. So when the Germans left, not caring even if they covered them very much, when the Germans left, he managed to scramble out of the grave and came and told us what was happening. And we understood then that we were in grave danger, and we also knew that there was nothing for us to do, because we had nowhere to run, nowhere to go.
You had said that that people would watch people leave every day and hope that they came back. People must have known that there was some kind of actions going on already before this big one, yes?
Not to my knowledge.
But they had fear, right?
It
was a fear of the unknown.
I was a child. I can't tell you what everybody thought.
No, but
what I was saying is that this is what happened, and then this was the big one. And at this point, everybody tried to look for a hiding place.
Right.
And we all knew that this will happen again. And so the next time came a demand for people to go to work in Germany. Nobody believed them anymore. Everybody scattered around and hid. They managed to find the number of people they needed. They loaded them on the train. And after that, you see, there were not many Jews left in that town, a small town. So they decided to throw us all out, the rest of us, the rest of the Jews. They threw us out again to the little town of Tworsk. That's where it eventually became a ghetto, all right?
So I skipped a big chunk,
yes,
sorry.
So, but at that time it was still open. They just told us which area to go to. we were just settling in, and we discovered that not only our little group who remained in our little town was there, but also small groups from the surrounding counties. And so we were all together there, and the first thing my mother said to me, everybody was looking for hiding places. And she said, it's not going to work because they're going to move us again. That was her understanding. And she started trying to get the children, my sister and me, out into Romania. It was only to cross the river, but it wasn't easy, and nothing worked. So in the end, when the demand came again for people to work in Germany, everybody hid in their places, wherever they could find. But my mother, because we had been there before, so we knew a few farmers there. So my mother decided to put me with one farmer, and I was up in the loft. And she went and paid another farmer to keep her through the day. And we split up that way, and all day long.
And she had your sister?
Oh, yes, she was with my sister. Yes, she took Eve. So I all day was thinking that she was caught.
Right.
And the lady who had me kept coming back saying that she had seen this one in the square and this one. They would collect them and put them in the square until they had the right number. And but there were people I knew in the square, so I knew that a lot of people were caught. And towards the end of the evening, finally, she did come back and to pick me up. And she said to me that she was in a terrible state because she thought I was caught. And so she said to me, you're never going to split up again. Whatever happens, the three of us will go together.
Right.
And that was her decision, and of course I agreed. After that...
Well, at one point, she tries to secure false papers.
Yeah, well, that was the thing. We see, before the next time it happened, she and her friends decided, because we were all females, they couldn't check, they decided to try and get false identities. So they went to a Catholic priest. You know, Poland is 99.999 Catholic, so it had to be a Catholic priest, and purchased some papers with for the three of us.
And this is, I mean, the war is going on. It's very hard times. What did she purchase the false papers with?
Her friends helped her. You know, we had good friends. People were helping each other.
Right.
You know, they wanted us to try, because people understood there was not much hope.
Right.
And so we got new names. So, because my sister didn't know anything, she was a baby. So she sat me down and told me that my new name, my new grandparents, birthplace, whatever I needed to know. And
so you memorized a whole new identity.
Oh, I had to memorize that. And our friends kindly took us to it was not closed yet. So I remember that we went to the train, and they told me that we were going to a place called Yasharoff, which was another town. It was kind of halfway to Krakow. I don't know why, but anyway, that's where we're supposed to be going. And as I said, there were no more Jews there officially. They helped us get on the train, and we said goodbye to them. And as I said, all we had left was the suitcase of clothing and little money they collected for her. And we started traveling. We were supposed to be traveling 2 days and 2 nights. You know, those trains were not today's trains. They were old-fashioned, very old, and not nice. But well, we were doing our best to run. We knew we were going to have to be changed somewhere. I was very scared. You know, the train would stop, my mother would go down, and I would be waiting. So it was a little scary. As we were traveling, a young man attached himself to us and started chatting with my mother, being very nice and asking about the children. My mother was very nice to him, and they were chatting away. Then he started asking more probing questions, and my mother finally told me, look, he pushed me so hard I couldn't do anything. I told him. I actually told him that we were Jewish. And he said, well, in that case, I am going to Yasharoff as well. I will have to take you with me. And when we get to Yasharoff, I'm going to give you back. I will pass you
Hand you
on
in.
to the Gestapo. And so my mother understood that. She said, she told me everything. She said she understood that that's what's going to happen. We were going to travel with him, and when we get to Yasharoff, we were going to be handed over to the Gestapo.
But do you think that he knew you were Jews before?
He was suspicious.
Yeah.
You know, mother to children, you know, he was suspicious, yes. That's how he started, you know, pushing.
Prying and,
yeah,
right.
Prying, yeah. And so that's how we traveled, and my mother, never giving up, started thinking, what could we do? What could be done? Well, we couldn't run. There was nowhere to go. We knew that we had not many choices, if any. So finally, she came to a decision. She explained that to me too very carefully. She said that she made a deal with him. She said that she was giving him tickets for the luggage and any money she had, and even promised the coats on her backs, if he would do one thing for her. When we get to the Gestapo, to have us shot, all three of us at once, because she understood that there would be less suffering for all of us if we were not going to be taken away. She knew the children would be killed, no matter what. She did not want to survive by herself, because they might have sent her to a labor camp, but she just didn't want to do it without the children. So that's what she asked him to do. And apparently he said yes, and that's how we traveled the rest of the way. She kept thinking, but nothing else came to mind. And we were kind of in a stupor almost. We were traveling 4 days and 4 nights on a train. It is really horrible, and I was full of lice, our head and clothes, everything. And finally we get to Yasharoff. And when we get there, and on the platform, we start going down the platform, and I suddenly woke up, and I said, oh my God, I'm going to die. And I started pulling at my mother, Mom, I don't want to die. My poor mother, as we were walking, she said to him, well, you know, maybe you can let her go because she's blonde and green-eyed and maybe she'll survive. And I said, no, I'm not going without you. So we continue walking towards the Gestapo. And then she says to him, do you have any children of your own? And he said, yes. So she said, look, I gave you everything I had, keep it. Why don't you just let us go and try our luck? And as we were walking, and he is walking with us, and she said to him, and she adds this, why do you want us on your conscience? I've given you everything I have. Why don't you just let us go? Try. And something touched him, and he said to her, you don't have a chance. But he turned around and left us. And so there we were, the three of us, homeless and nothing, just my mother holding the baby and me by the hand, and standing in the middle of this sort of town,
Right.
on the main road. She started looking around.
He took everything but
Yes.
not your false documents.
Pardon? Well, no, the documents I think she had somewhere in her pocket. No, what would he do with the documents? No. I
Which
never,
was,
never asked about that one. And my mother saw a little cafe. She walked in there and asked for a little milk for the baby, and the big baby by then. And then she started asking around if there were any places that took lodgers in. It was very important for us to be inside because the Germans were walking around, you know, with guns up, and it was very easy to get shot or taken in or whatever. She didn't know about the papers. I don't know to this day if they were real or not. I gave them to the museum with that proviso that I don't know if they were good or not. There were no computers in those days, so they couldn't just check. At any rate, we didn't want them examined if possible. And the one man got up and said, yes, I know a washer lady that takes people in and lodges. So I said, I'll walk you over to them. So the three of us went with him, not too far from there, and you saw the little house. There were three separate apartments, if you can
In that
call
house?
them that, in that house, yes. We were the middle one. There was this little lady, very sweet old lady, that was about high, and she saw the mother and two kids, and she said, okay, I'll take you. But then the sons, they had three strapping sons, and they said, oh no, Mom, don't take her. And I'm not surprised that she did that, but she said, oh no, she said, this is a mother and two children, I have to take her. And she did. She took her in. We got a bed. That's all we needed. My mother explained to her that we had no money, but the next day she would go to work, and whatever she earned, she would bring for us and to keep us. And she did that. She took, we used to go to homes and help and change the jobs a few times. Me, as a Polish child, I could go to school for 2 hours a day. Now, I had no background in religion. My own, I hardly knew. I only knew I was Jewish, and that I was going to a Hebrew school on Sunday when the time came, and they taught me how to sign my name in Hebrew. And I don't know exactly why, but I still know how to sign my name in Hebrew. As far as religion, you know, I just knew I was Jewish, that's it. So I had no background in religion per se. And then as far as Catholic religion is, I knew even less. So all I was told was I have to cross myself with my right hand as you go in, as I come out. That's all I knew. But the good thing was that one of the hours of the 2 hours in school was one was priest. There was a priest teaching religion, and the other was more general. And the Catholic religion was being taught with a catechism, and there was a little booklet with questions and answers. So I grabbed at that, and of course I could read, so I quickly read them, and that helped me a great deal. Priest was very nice, very sweet, and of course they didn't know, but still I did very well with him and the teacher, and because I could read, I was a good pupil, so that was fine. I also helped by working through it for a neighbor. My mother thought it was good for us to be busy and to be working.
So let me ask you a question, though, about the Catholicism. And
yeah.
did you embrace it as something new and knowledgeable that you were learning? And
Well, I knew that I had to pretend to be a Catholic.
this is what I was wondering.
Yes.
Is it mostly pretending, but
Well, it was pretending, but I must say I like Catholic religion, and my mother realized that. So at one point, she quietly took me over, and she said to me, look, we all pray to the same God, but through different religions, and you're Jewish. So that made me quite completely, I knew what I was doing, and as I said, I liked the Catholic religion, but I knew it wasn't mine. So that didn't give me any trouble.
so
Yeah.
I just want to ask a question about
Yeah.
you and your relationship with your mother at this point. Is it a typical mother-daughter relationship? Did you give her a difficult time because that's just what it was like? Or were you aware that you needed to behave, do everything she said?
Well, I did anyway. I had a very good relationship with my mother. My mother was so nice and so fair always, even in her punishments. And we knew we were saving our lives.
Right.
That was always in our minds as well. And I was we were partners. There was nobody else who knew who we were. My sister didn't know. Obviously, she was too young to.
Right.
So yes.
So you said you were partners. Did you miss having her as a mother? Or did you have her both as a mother and a partner?
No, she was still my mother, but also a partner.
And you helped her?
I was her support, yes. Because there was just two of us who knew who we were. So she used to sometimes chatted with me and taught me about her youth and what it was like when she was famous swimmer, and She was very young, and it was a very nice relationship.
And during the day, she worked.
Yes, she worked. And I went to school, and the woman who had us, the lady that had us, was very nice to me, but she taught me a lot of things. I was helping around the house. She made sure that you see, she wanted to save my soul. I understand and appreciate that. So she sent me for classes. I went to communion. There's a picture of me there in communion. And that was all right. Everything was quite acceptable. I mean, I was just scared.
Right, you knew you needed to do it, right?
Yeah. As I said, there was nothing, and I did not feel bad about doing any of it. We were hungry. We kids used to go scramble, try to steal some food from the farmers, for instance. When they came in, they would have to check in a certain amount of product that they had to bring in. And once they were stamped that they brought in the right amount, then we kids used to jump over the back of the trucks, not trucks, they were the carts. And we used to just grab whatever we could. We had mainly barley, that's what I remember, which I did not like even before the war. So
did your mom work for the Germans then?
Well, at first she worked all over the place. She was very worried about security, and one of the things that she worried very much about was my sister's hair, because my sister has dark hair, curly hair. She has a little afro. And this is terrible because for Poland, because the Polish girls then, there were not that many other foreigners, that it was just Polish girls, straight blonde hair. And and I had blonde hair, at least, were wavy, but they braided mine. But hers was impossible. And even today, when she goes to the hairdresser, she comes in with beautiful hair, and then 2 drops of water fell, and then she goes into So she always had this problem, and she just shaved it off.
Why was it a problem? Explain why dark curly hair.
Because she was afraid of being recognized as
a Jew.
Yes,
Okay.
of course. Only Jewish girls had curly hair.
So she looked Jewish.
So
and you looked more...
She doesn't really look Jewish, but the hair was, a giveaway.
Yes. So did she shaved her head off?
Not me, her.
Your mother shaved her head off?
Yes, completely.
And
she said
did it work?
Well, it must have worked. She said it was because if you shave it off, it comes back thicker. So that was the excuse. She also tried to offer ourselves as Poles to go to work in Germany, because she felt that the Polish people recognized Jews much easier than the Germans. But they didn't take us because my sister was too young. So she tried all kinds of stuff in order to be more secure. And what happened was that by the time she applied for the job with the Germans, was because she felt that if she had an ID card, in case they could catch up with us and ask for papers, that this might help.
Right.
And it actually did, because what happened was at one point they came to the house and they started screaming, get out, with guns drawn in the middle of the night. Everybody got up, and my mother showed the papers, so she shows them the Ausweis, the ID card, and they said, oh yeah, all right, you stay. So the only Jews stayed. And she and the others were taken into the station to be checked out. What they wanted to know about the Poles, that they worked for them. If they were busy working for the Germans, they were fine. So they sent them back the next day. But we didn't have to go to the station. And that was one of those things that was just lucky that she did that. We had during this time one letter from the people we left behind. And they gave us some very good news, and that was that my father had sent a letter through the Red Cross that he was with his sister in Palestine, now Israel. But at that time it was all under the British. It was under the British mandate. So we understood that he was free and he was out of Russia. We could not do anything because during the German occupation, obviously we couldn't contact anybody outside. But we had that information, so we hoped that if anything things get a little bit somehow worked out that maybe sometime in the future the war will be over and might be able to get back to him, but we knew he was safe.
So getting back to the woman that you were hiding with, just briefly, you said she had sons, and were her sons ever suspicious? Did they ever question, or
They could have been, I don't know. Frankly, I don't know.
just let it go?
They never checked, they never asked, you know.
So I just want to jump ahead a little to when you were, I mean, it's not really liberation, but suddenly the war ends, but in a tragic way.
Well, yes, sort of. Not quite. Well, because I'm here. We did not know what was going on in the front. We had no papers, no radios. If you had a radio, that was a death penalty. Right. So nobody had, and we didn't know what was going on. And so my mother kept working, and as I said, we didn't know what was going on. But one morning, usually the horse and carts would go at 4 o'clock in the morning. And this time, that morning, there was nothing. It was just loud silence on the streets. And my mother was in the bed with my sister, and I was standing by the window, by her bed. And she was talking to me and saying, well, maybe should I go to work or should I not? No. And then suddenly there was a tremendous, in black and a bang, and the one and only bomb that fell on that town, fell on that house and split over the top. And I started crying, my hand, and my mother grabbed my sister and me by the hand, and we walked out. My hand was bleeding badly, and there was nobody to pick me up either, so we just walked. We walked to the hospital, and then we learned that the Russians were coming, and the second time, and they patched me up. They scared my mother. That they said that there was no penicillin, so I had a very big open wound on my hand, and they said they might have to cut the hand off. They didn't. The nuns were wonderful nurses, and they saved my hand. Mm-hmm. In the meantime, my mother started knitting again a little bit to get some money to send requests for my father. Everybody was looking for people, and she finally started writing those announcements, and luckily we found my father, and it took a while.
The war is,
well, the Russians are coming.
Right.
Yeah.
So the war is still somewhat going on in different parts of Europe, for sure.
Well, my mother said to me, they're not leaving. Mm-hmm. She understood.
And so
they were not killing the Jews.
That's right, okay.
Yeah, and in some way, they made some kind of a semi-official agreement that they let the Jews out. Mm-hmm. Semi-officially, because you had to pay the guards on the frontier, but they did allow us out eventually. Mm-hmm. So.
But your mother wasn't still open about the fact that you were Jewish. You didn't talk.
No, we couldn't, because when I was in the hospital, I said, now I can say who I am. And she said, no, there was a pogrom, and they killed the few Jews that came out of hiding.
There was still a lot of anti-Semitism in Poland.
We had to keep that up until we left, until we got in with the Jewish agency group there. We had to keep that up, yes.
So I'm sorry to...
no, that's all right. That's all right.
So you were in contact with your dad. You were still living in Poland.
Right. My father, it took a while. My mother also was diagnosed with breast cancer, so she had to have the operation.
Where did she have it? And where did she have the operation?
There, in Yaroslav.
In Yaroslav. So we're still in Yaroslav.
Oh, yes, we were in Yaroslav, and in the meantime, my father did not want to come himself. He was afraid of being taken by the Russians again, so he sent my cousin. And he came to get us. Now, when my mother went back to the place where we were living, that one in the middle, she discovered that the lady died with the same bomb.
Bombing. Oh.
Yeah, because we came through the kitchen and the roof had come down, and apparently she was underneath. Oh, so she died, unfortunately, yes. And there was nothing in that little place that you could salvage, so the neighbor next door took us in. So when my cousin came, he put us in touch with the Jewish agency, and finally we had to move to another place closer to Krakow, and we were finally transported out. We made it to Berlin.
And when did you reunite with your father?
Pardon?
When did you reunite with your father? When did you and your father?
Oh, well, he came twice. He missed us. You know, we were on the road somewhere. Everybody was moving around.
Right, of course.
So finally he caught up with us, and we were in Munich, and we stayed in there was in Italy there was a DP camp called Trani, and we spent some time there. But my father, it turned out that he was with a Polish unit that was created with Stalin's agreement, that they let them out to fight because they were worried about having more boots on the ground. So they let out the whole unit, and the general, who was also a prisoner there, who created this unit, was very kind, and he would not take just the men. He said he's going to take families as well. And that's how my aunt and uncle and cousin came out, and of course my father. And they were serving in the British Army. They were part of the British Army. And my father was actually stationed in Egypt. And but his sister was in Tel Aviv, so.
And eventually you moved to the United Kingdom?
Well, because he was part of the British Army, we had the right to go to England. So we didn't have to wait for visas.
And what year was that? Do you remember?
1940 something. I can't remember exactly. I can look it up. But
And you reestablished a life in the United Kingdom?
That's what we had to do. We were started in a new language and everything new, and eventually people...
How did you like England?
Well, I'm not sure. They were good to us, you know. We were not in danger of dying, but I didn't know the language, and it was difficult. And my one outlet that I found for myself was table tennis, because I played a lot. The table tennis was everywhere, and I liked tennis, but there were no facilities for that, so I played a lot of table tennis.
So you talk about it as if it's a hobby, but really you were this amazing table tennis person. You played, you had a lot of success with it. You traveled around the world with it.
Well, what happened was when we got to our house, there was a Maccabi club, which is a Jewish youth club, and I spent all my time, all my evenings there. And when Israel was created, they also started having the Jewish Olympic Games called Maccabiah Games. And eventually they sent two guys and me to represent England in Israel. And that was when I traveled to Israel for the first time. And that was wonderful. I came back. I didn't want to come back, but I did because my mother was not very well. So I came back. That was 1953. And my mother passed away in 1956, unfortunately. So I went again to the next Maccabiah was 1957, excuse me.
So your mom was young. She was
48.
in her 40s.
Right. Yes, very young.
Where was your sister at this point? Living in England?
She was in England. She was very young, 17 and a half. I worried about her a lot. And in the end, I brought her over to Israel for a years of service. It's called Shnat Sharut. She came, and all the mascara came down, and she became, because they make you work. Half a day you work in the kibbutz, and half a year the day, you learn Hebrew. She met her future husband there, and he's English, so they went back to London. So that's where she resides. She's in London, and.
But you lived in Israel for some time.
Yes.
How many years did you live in Israel?
11.
And you said something about living in Israel that I thought was interesting. It gave you back your Jewishness.
Absolutely. It gave me back my soul. Yeah, what happened was, you see, when I started working in Israel, I had to have a job in English. So I got a job at the American Embassy in Tel Aviv, which was very glamorous. I liked that very much. And I met my husband there. He was another survivor from Bulgaria. So the two of us were working for Americans, and my husband was sent over to United States, coast to coast. He was with U.S. information agents. And therefore they wanted him to know about America. He was presenting America viewed, there was Vietnam War, and he needed to know more about the States. So he fell in love with the United States. So he said, why don't we go for a year to the United States? We had my son was already 5 years old. By the time we got, I think, here, he was already 6. So we ended up here. He got a job here, and was in 1968.
And you've been here ever since.
And I've been here ever since. When I retired, I said I must do some volunteer work. I didn't know what I wanted to do.
What did you do for a living here?
I worked for a lot of real estate offices. Not construction. I mean, in the office. Yeah.
And you retired, and I'm sorry, I interrupted you, but you decided you needed to volunteer.
Well, when I retired, I was looking for something to do, and I found the Holocaust Museum, of course, and I missed the fact that when I got to Israel, how wonderful it was, because that was my kind of important date in my life. I don't know how it is, but I think being Jewish, going to Israel was something that a lot of people feel, and I felt immediately at home, and I felt that I was somebody, because being a refugee is no fun. And in England, even though they legally gave me all the rights, they didn't love me like, in Israel. In Israel, everybody is open, everybody wanted to show me, to teach me, to do things for me. And I just really and truly felt a new person there. And I hope I'm still that, even though I left Israel. But I do go back often. And my trek is usually I go from here to Tel Aviv and then London and then back home.
Which you're doing soon, yes?
Pardon?
In June, I think.
Yes.
Well, I wanted to take a few questions, and we have one right here in front by way of the web.
Thank you very much. We have a couple questions from students. We have a couple classrooms, actually, of students in Iowa who are watching today online. So
You'll have to
they've
repeat.
got lots of great questions. Can you hear me?
She just asked me to repeat it if she can't hear it.
Okay.
Speak up a little.
So we've got a couple classrooms in Iowa watching today.
People in Iowa are watching
And
on the web.
Oh, I see.
so they have lots of great
Welcome.
questions, but I'm just going to give you a couple quick and easy ones, I think. The first one is, do you remember what your name was on your false papers? And were you related to your sister and mother in the fake identity documents as well?
Yes, I think. Do you remember, what was your false name?
Your
false name.
Litinska, Halina Litinska.
And you really didn't have to change the first name as
No,
much
I
as,
didn't, and I don't know why they dropped the H.
Okay. So yes, the answer is yes.
Yes, okay. And then we have another question about, do you remember seeing any kind of German propaganda as a young child under occupation, posters or anything like that?
Do you remember seeing any German propaganda posters as a young child? The swastikas and posters, radio broadcasts?
I don't recall that. We didn't have a radio. No radio was allowed.
So
Yeah, but I had to have the yellow star, so that was the only thing that I remember.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. No. By the time we got to Yasharoff, there were no, there were no Jews, and they had us all, in slave-like way.
Sure.
So they didn't need.
They didn't need propaganda
No.
because they had already been through the town.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yes, that's right.
When you were living with false papers, did you have any Polish friends, or was that too risky?
Did you have Polish friends when you were living in hiding on false papers?
Well, I wasn't in hiding. I was just,
Hiding in plain sight, I guess.
yeah.
Did you have friends who were Polish?
Oh, yes, we had a great time. In fact, when we got to England, I remember still going to church with them.
So, in addition to that, I just wanted to also ask, do you remember ever wondering if these people that you encountered while you were on false papers were also Jews? Did that ever come up?
No, they were all Polish. They were
All Polish.
No, the Jews that came out of hiding were really in hiding somewhere.
So your mom actually chose a good town for this. You were pretty safe.
Well, we don't know.
Right.
Anything could have given us away.
Correct.
That's why my sister didn't know. And she was very upset.
Oh, when she found out. Which
Which was
can imagine.
because the Polish education is such. Unfortunately, in small towns, if you're Jewish. But the lady who took us, the next door neighbor that took us in, my sister told me this. She said, she asked me, she said, now you can tell me you're Jewish, right?
Oh, God.
You see, and my sister said, look at me. Do I have horns? Do I have a tail?
Wow.
Yeah.
She was really indoctrinated.
No, well, she was,
Yeah.
yes, exactly. So, we had to explain to her,
Yes, go ahead.
Do you ever travel back to Poland?
Do you ever travel back to Poland?
I have been about 4 times, but with good reasons. Commemoration of 50th anniversary of Warsaw Ghetto Uprising, and then to see if my house was still up, and my house would have been, it's now Ukraine, that part of Poland, and when they found my mother's and other Jewish athletes' details, and they had a very nice exhibit in Krakow, so my sister and I went. And we also saw the new museum that they have.
In Warsaw?
Yes, in History of the Jews. So that was another one. And I went once to see the Auschwitz with a group from here. But I don't normally go to Poland because I don't feel comfortable. And there have been problems because a lot of people are still living in houses that belong to the Jews, and they've been there for 70 years and they don't want to give it back. I didn't, because I didn't have any, but that was the feeling that, you're always worried. I was warned not to be very careful. So I don't go for pleasure. I would like to, but I'm not comfortable.
Yes.
So, if you met a German who had killed people during the war, but he was sorry he did it, and he came up to you right now, would you be angry or have hard feelings toward him?
If you met a German who had murdered people during the war, would you be angry?
First of all, I can't meet a German through the war. He must be very, very old. I have met young Germans, and we have a wonderful German ambassador here. They accept and admit that it was what they did was terrible. They educate their children, and they can't give us back the people who they killed. But hatred is not very useful. Because if you hate, you only hurt yourself. I do not hate them. I would like to actually be friends with them and teach them and tell them my story. And they are very, very good. As far as I know, Mrs. Merkel took all these refugees because she said they didn't take Jews during the war. So that's why she was, trying to help refugees. So I don't feel I hate the Germans. The German language makes me feel funny, but a lot of Jews speak German too. So no, I don't feel bad about them.
Yes.
Did you ever see the person that gave you the chance to make it on your own whenever you got off the train again?
Did you ever see the Polish Volksdeutsche man that let you become free?
No, I haven't. No, I wish I could. He must be very old now, but I would have liked to. I would have liked to thank him, actually, yes.
Yes.
Who did you keep as your closest allies?
Who did you keep as your closest allies?
What, during the war? My mother. I couldn't have allies. I mean, I had friends.
You were each other's allies.
Yes, because, you know, you had to be so very careful, you know. So I was, mainly it was my mother. It was very hard when we came out and I became a child again.
Yes. We have time for one more, right here.
Would you ever think of going back to like Germany? Like ever go to Germany and see what they did?
Would you ever visit Germany?
Oh yes, but I had no reason to visit Germany. I don't particularly want to, but I would not, I mean, if there was a reason, I would go. Yeah.
Jude, do you have any more? Okay. So it's our tradition at First Person to let you have the last word, so I'm turning it over to you.
Well, I would like to just say that there's a Hebrew saying, tikkun olam, which means repairing the world. And I feel that that's what I'd like everybody to help to do that, because we all need to help each other and worry about the future. And I'm old, so I can only talk about the past, but the future belongs to the young people. And there's always time and there's always need to repair the world. So that's my wish.
Thank you so much, Halina. Thank you.